Actually, this struggle, the very notion of gender being a rigid binary concept, for instance, you're born a male or therefore you will grow up to be a man, or you're born a female, subsequently will become a woman. This struggle involves transgender people. The struggle exists despite South Africa's altruistic constitution that guarantees equal rights and protection for minority groups such as the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex people, otherwise known as the LGBTI community. Transgender people are crying foul, saying their rights are overlooked. They say that daily they endure persistent mistreatment and persecution, disturbingly from those who are supposed to be their guardians in society, to access basic services and enjoy civil liberties in South Africa. Steve Letsie recently launched a report which chronicles the plight of transgender women in South Africa. Steve joins us now. She's the director of a non-governmental organization called Access Chapter 2. She's here with two transgender women who will paint us a picture of how it is to live as a transgender woman in South Africa. April Tshabalala, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And Catricia Tshiloane, thank you so much for coming through today. Hello, Steve.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
We talked to you a lot, so we had to.
Absolutely.
It's tough enough living as an identified gender person in South Africa. What is it like to be a transgendered woman?
I think that question will go directly, to April and Catricia, because I think, I identify as a lesbian woman, but just because the community LGBTI, which is a broad spectrum of acronym you've stated, but it represents, population with gender and sexual diversity in that regard. But what we have seen, in South Africa, despite the constitution itself, but these rights are not a lived reality. Issues that differ according to various categories of livelihood, whether from geographical spectrum, access to education, to health, justice. So the issues are very broad, and LGBTI person experience that daily.
April, Catricia, give us that sense. Starting with you, April.
Okay, so basically, like, as a transgender woman, it's like you have your identity. You identify yourself as a woman. But somehow, just because of the concept of just being transgender, it's almost like then your experience becomes different from like generally how women are perceived or how women live in our society. So from my personal experience, because obviously as transgender women, we've got our different experiences out there. We've got different stories to sort of share, and our experience. Like, I can't speak on behalf of like the general community, like the transgender community. I can just speak for myself, and it's like it's not easy, for example, for one to just go out there in public and just like freely access things without being questioned or being sort of like not necessarily interrogated, but just to be in society and have people question you before you just present yourself, So I could say, for example, just like going to a store or a bank, and then you have to get, like, for example, people questioning you with regards to your identity, and especially if your gender marker hasn't been changed, for example. So, yeah.
Okay. So, like when you're applying at a bank or those kind of situations.
Situations, yes. So,
Catricia, what has been your experience?
The thing is, when you are walking on the street and the people, they just assume that you are gay. They don't see a woman. They just say it's a gay person. They don't even ask you if you identify as a man or as a woman. They just already assume. And they give you the wrong names and the wrong identity. And that really bothers me a lot. And the other thing is, we are facing too much different kinds of discrimination in our communities, because we're in the different communities. So even though you are dating someone, they won't say you are dating a girl. They will say you are dating a man. And that's totally wrong.
There's like a misconception.
Steve, you as an activist, interact a lot with government. What are the sort of conversations that are taking place in terms of recognizing the wide spectrum of identities?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest issues, we have to deal with the binaries that we have to unpack, we have to challenge, and it's a system. Unfortunately, systems are set up in
Have they all been identified?
Not all, not all, but majority of systems have been identified. What are the bottlenecks? Now, if you speak about how our systems are so heteronormative, they are so cisgendered, that, you go to a bathroom would be female,
it's either
male,
or.
And if you have a gender non-conforming or people who do not identify as cis, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
You look at the school uniform, you look at a gender marker, how our documents, so if you taking transgender person, and what April has raised, that if your gender marker has not changed, you go and apply.
I imagine that is so important, though, because that's
issue.
part of our daily lives.
Absolutely.
Every day we have to fill in some sort of form that where we have to indicate who we are.
Absolutely. And if none of the sex disaggregated data, it does not go to the extent of analyzing the gender, you're going to lose a lot, and that's what we're picking up.
Do you though, April? Do you lose out on opportunities because you do not classify as either or?
It does happen, because what happens is that once, for example, they see you as, for example, they see a woman, but then you present a document that says that you're male, in the sense that maybe your gender marker hasn't been changed, and then all of a sudden it just takes away all of those privileges that, for example, women get to experience. It's like now they have to then question you, and then it's like,
and possibly not let you in.
Possibly not let you in. So you lose out on jobs, and now you can imagine the struggle for most transgender people, that you find that now they're unemployed because of that.
What's the conversation about the changing of gender markers? Do they get changed eventually, or is the government not agreeing to that yet?
Well, I think, our constitutional laws does allow that. Once you go through the transitioning period, and this is one of the biggest thing about having to get access to hormonal therapy, having to get access to surgical care, and which that's what trans community need. But you do have a document from Department of Health going to the Department of Home Affairs where you can change. There's an Act 49 where you really can access sex exchange privileges of legally. However, it's the practice. That's one of the biggest challenge. When we have constitution, when we have laws, these laws are not observed by officials, and that's the biggest issue.
They're not observed, and sometimes they're not even known
and
by
respected.
the people who are supposed to implement them.
And that's what we have picked up. A lot of trans person have not change their gender marker, and that's the research that we've done, because they fear being stigmatized, being isolated, discriminated, and also it's also lack of information. While we have a brilliant law, it's not promoted, people are not talking about it.
Catricia, what would you like to see happening?
I'd like to see that maybe in the schools to be taught about the transgenders.
Started from there.
Yes. Yeah. Because some of them, they're afraid to go to school because school uniform, if you're a boy, you must wear a grey flannel. If you're a girl, you must wear a gym dress.
Yeah.
And so for some transgender women, they can't wear gym dress, they'll have to wear a grey flannel. So it's supposed to be started over there, and that we can teach the others in the communities as well, that the thing of assuming things and telling people that they're gay and everything is supposed to stop. We are human, and we're supposed to learn more about one another than to put one another down. Because even us, we have feelings.
Yeah.
Like the rest of you guys is cisgenders. And the other thing is, maybe if we could talk about it a lot on the television and the videos.
Like we're doing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
education,
in some other stuff, you won't even see them. It's just based on they just show it a little bit on the television, but you won't even see it on the videos anywhere else.
How does this speak to the broader conversation about just how the world works? Because if one were to counter these arguments and say, even when you do classify as a girl or a boy, you still got to follow some rules,
of course,
in terms of how you behave when you're in a certain place, whether it's church or workplace, how you behave when you're in a school. How have you countered those kind of conversations?
The most important thing is understanding society we construct. So gender is a social construct. It's not
in diversity.
It's not a biology. You are not born with your gender. And I think that's where we need to start. We need to empower.
Say that again.
You are not born with your gender. You are born with a sex.
Okay.
Biology. That's where it is, because biology will speak about your genitalia. That's how we can confirm a child's sex. It's what we see between two legs. And that's what we need to understand. The chromosomes, the hormones, and all the other things that we need to understand biology. But your gender, it's what we are teaching you. This is a child. We are teaching you to be a girl. Girls sit like this. Girls do that. All of it, it's a social construct. We need to unpack that. And education is very key. So what Catricia was raising, starting at school, when we said we are doing subjects like life orientation, comprehensive sexuality education, we need to unpack it beyond heteronormativity and cisgender education, because that's when we lock a system that does not recognize diversity. So how we counter it, it's that we need education that is decolonized in a manner that can unpack diversity of human being, of human nature. And that's what we've said. Our laws have recognized that, but our practice have not been as effective as it should be.
We were actually having a conversation a few weeks ago with Dr. Cronje Davis from UJ. I don't know if you've interacted with them, who was telling us about gender dysphoria and this huge spectrum of human identity. How nascent or usual is this conversation in South Africa?
You see, I'm glad you had that conversation a few weeks ago. On the 25th of May, the World Health Organization have removed that classification, because what it did, it actually diagnosed people as, on the gender dysphoria as a mental disorder. So when one comes and say, I'm transgender, I do not connect with the body that was assigned at birth, that was a diagnosis. So what World Health Organization has done, depathologized, which means we cannot classify transgender as a gender, as a mental illness, because it was wrong in the first place, because there are mental health implication by the fact that we're saying it's a mental disorder. You are actually causing harm to a human being. So here we are in South Africa, where we then say, from this declassification or removing it on the classification, which then that's what we need to move out on, because anyone, like I said, you're not born with your gender. It's very important, because when anyone comes and brought up in a particular manner, you would have to then challenge what the law says and the livelihood is.
So April, in a world where boys will get together and play soccer and girls will get together and play whatever is perceived to be a girl's game, in a world where we all accept our diversity, what brings us together?
I think I would say Ubuntu, for example. I would say it's like love, acceptance. I look at those kind of, because that for me is more sort of profound. It's something that's more like something that I could relate to as a transgender person, because we want to be included in a society, we want to be part of a society, and we don't want to feel excluded.
But Catricia, we also need to accept that if we go that way, we're talking about a totally different world. So that means a complete change.
Indeed, but the thing is, we're supposed to start step by step. We can't just go in head full of body. We're supposed to start step by step, and we can see where we can reach, whoever we can reach, and then we'll see from there.
What kind of world are we envisioning?
You see, a world that existed before. It's a world,
really,
for us as Africans, it was never that it never existed. LGBTI persons existed. These terms are new. How we name and label things.
We're yet again classifying.
We have classified.
Yeah.
Human is what we know and understand. And the fact that in the past, sex was taboo. That's why, because we never spoke about the sexual diversity. What we have seen, it was human being, it was Buto, it was Ubuntu, that what you do behind closed door, it was your own business.
Yeah.
But because we've labeled in a way that then questions, how we define and identify ourselves, we've labeled it. So that world existed before. And for me, it's actually then saying, it's teaching us how in that world of labeling, in the world of identifying somebody, it's a world where we still need to adjust and work around respect, integrity and dignity. And that's the world that we know. It's what we knew before. That's why I said we need to decolonize our own mindset of how we see human beings.
That world we're talking about, that you say existed, but the world we know is boy meets girl. And in this new world, who approaches who for what?
Yeah. So
without being disrespectful.
Absolutely. You see, unfortunately, because we still live in a world of patriarchy, of domination, because there's a voice, there's power issue, those dynamics exist. Unfortunately, it's a world that we still had.
Yeah.
And those who speak out to saying this is how we construct our own society will marginalize anyone else who's not speaking, who's not visible, who's not out there. And unfortunately, that's what we still need to. The rules of engagement is the rules that we set, and if we need to unchange and learn a few things, that's what we need to adjust towards. It doesn't mean we do not have heterosexuals, we don't have homosexuals, bisexuals. We need to know, if anyone comes out and say, "Mom, I'm gay," you as a parent have a responsibility towards your child, not because they are just gay, but because you love them as your child, to saying you are who you are and I love you for who you are.
Yeah.
If your child says, "Mom, I'm trans," or "I do not connect," even if they don't have the word transgender because it's a learning, right? If they don't, and say, "Oh, Mom, I'm liking this," embrace your child. Why would we want to lock?
They've got an inner being.
They've got an inner being.
This is what you're connecting to.
Exactly, because you cannot all the time saying, "Oh, boys don't cry." That's also what we did to young boys.
Yeah.
And that's what we did to men, because we told them not to cry, so they don't connect to their feelings.
How do you flip that around, though, to parenting and saying parents don't always know what to say or what to do?
I'm a parent myself. I've got a 17-year-old child. And I don't think parents don't know. Sometimes it's not knowing how to say things. I mean, even with my own parents, my grandparents, you see how the teaching is for being a parent. And you learn and you know what is right and what is wrong. You have to follow a journey of bringing up a human being. And that's what you need to do. What is wrong is completely wrong. If somebody's coming in late at night, we agreed you can't be late. Those things you have to address. But there's something about nurturing a child. It's about how you understand to teach respect, to teach humanity in all of those things. So we can't want to shift responsibility of understanding, embracing diversity of a child to saying parents don't know. I think that's where it goes wrong.
April, let's talk about those rules of engagement. Okay. And I'll talk to you and Catricia both about this, how you handling it on a personal and an individual level. How you decide who you're going to approach, who you're going to fall in love with, those kind of dynamics. How do you go about, how do you navigate that space, that murky space?
Okay, so because you get, for example, trans people that live openly, and then trans people that choose to live like stealth lives and not sort of expose themselves as transgender, so they're not that visible.
Yeah.
You'd find that if now I'm in a position where I meet someone and I'm attracted to them, you as a transgender person have the right to actually disclose your trans status to someone. You don't have to disclose. And it's like people should just respect just that part of you. And because I have that privilege to choose whether to disclose or not, it doesn't necessarily mean that like every time I meet people or I meet a person, or because remember now, gender identity is something on its own, and sexual orientation is another on its own.
Yeah.
So whoever I'm attracted to, I don't have to tell the person that I'm trans. It depends on basically, as the transgender person, someone might feel like they want to first connect with the person, get to know the person, and then disclose, whereas another person might want to protect their gender identity. You understand?
What has been the experience for you, Catricia?
The thing is with me, I was disclosing all the time. So since I was done with my operation and everything, I don't disclose anymore. I made that decision myself.
That I'm a woman?
Yes, because of immediately when you say I'm a transgender woman, they begin to be like, what are you, a freak?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't date a freak. So immediately when you say that, they begin to pull out. They leave you there. And it's like
how does that make you feel?
Sometimes it's very hurting. It's very sad. Because you are asking yourself too many questions. Who am I going to fall in love with? Am I going to stay by myself forever?
Am I never going to find love?
Lonely, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to be a lonely person with 55 cats. So you're supposed to know that.
I can even envision that in my head as you say it.
Because they just give you that thing of, no, I can't date this person.
Yeah.
So that is why I don't disclose anymore. What you see is what you get.
Catricia touches on an important conversation that is mostly spoken about, the operation.
The operation, yes.
The cost, the prohibitive costs of that. What has been your experience?
My experience, it was very difficult, but I got through it, and I was so happy to get the chance to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy about the process that
in a public space.
They did. I don't have a problem.
How long
with
does it take?
The thing is, they do it step by step.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because firstly, they just remove and do this, because if they do it in the same way, if you have infection, that means
it's at risk.
There is a risk that you
April,
can't
what was your
urinate or do anything else.
In terms of cost and the process?
Okay, so the surgical procedure is available at the government hospital.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And then there are places where obviously people do it privately.
Yeah.
I did mine at the government hospital, so I can say that it was funded in a way. So what happens is that you go into the panel of doctors at the public hospital.
Yeah.
They introduces the whole process.
And you're satisfied with the outcome?
I haven't completed all surgery, so I've done just the first part of it, and I'm happy. It was a very successful operation.
Stunning.
And,
I'm told I need to wrap up with time tied, and I'm so sorry, but it's a continuing conversation. Let's speak just briefly about the report that you brought out, and what are the important points there?
See, I think for me, it's the issue of violence. It's the issue of access to education and economic opportunity.
Yeah.
Those are very critical things, and that's what government must do. But also it's about equality. The government hospitals that April and Catricia have accessed are in metros like Tshwane or Johannesburg and Cape Town. But when you go to Limpopo, Northwest, other provinces, you do have limited or no access to service at all. So we're calling for equality for service.